Sometimes the storms that nearly kill us are the ones that save our lives. In the bitter winter of 1875, aging cowboy Jedediah Cole rides through a Wyoming blizzard seeking shelter. What he finds changes everything. Half buried in snow lies widow Nora, clutching twin daughters, all three near death. Jed brings them to his homestead, planning only to see them through the storm. But as days pass and snow piles higher, something stirs. The quiet, grieving man who lost his family years ago begins to feel alive again. These strangers have brought something back he thought was gone forever. But can a man haunted by ghosts of the past truly open his heart to a second chance at family? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The wind came from the north that morning, carrying the smell of snow and the promise of something bitter. Jedediah Cole had lived in Wyoming long enough to read the sky like other men read newspapers. The clouds rolling over the Medicine Bow Range were the color of gunmetal, heavy and low, and the temperature had dropped 15 degrees since dawn. He stood on the porch of his cabin, coffee cup warming his weathered hands, and watched the horizon swallow itself in gray. He was 57 years old that winter, though sometimes he felt twice that. The years had carved deep lines around his eyes and mouth, marks of sun and wind and sorrow. His hair, once dark as coal, had gone mostly silver. His hands were scarred from rope and wood and the thousand small violences of frontier life. But he was still strong, still capable. A man didn't survive alone in the Wyoming territory by being soft. The cabin behind him was solid work, built with his own hands 20 years back when he'd first claimed this land. Thick logs chinked tight against the wind. A stone fireplace that could warm the whole single room, windows with real glass he'd hauled from Laramie. It sat in a shallow valley, protected on three sides by pine-covered hills, with a creek running nearby that never went dry. Good water, good timber, good grass for cattle. He'd chosen well. The barn stood 50 yards east, sturdy enough to shelter his horse Buck and the half-dozen cattle he kept through winter. Smoke rose from the cabin's chimney, steady and straight, before the wind caught it and tore it apart. Everything was prepared for the storm he knew was coming. He'd stacked wood by the door, filled every bucket and barrel with water from the creek, brought in extra feed for Buck. He'd checked the barn roof yesterday, made sure it would hold under heavy snow. A man alone learned to prepare for everything. He'd been alone for 5 years now. 5 years since the typhoid came through and took Sarah, took the children. 5 years since he'd buried them on the hill behind the cabin, under the big pine where Sarah had liked to sit in summer and watch the sunset. He visited them most days, sometimes just to stand there, sometimes to talk. Told them about the weather, the cattle, small things. Never could bring himself to say the big things, the lonely things. Their names were carved into wooden crosses he'd made. Sarah Cole, beloved wife. Mary Cole, age 7. James Cole, age 5. The dates were burned into his memory deeper than any brand. July 1870. The fever had come fast and mean. They'd been fine one day, sick the next, gone 3 days later. All of them, one after another, while he'd held their hands and prayed and bargained with God and gotten nothing but silence in return. He'd thought about leaving after, selling the land, riding somewhere else, starting over where nothing reminded him. But in the end he stayed. This was where they were. This was the last place they'd all been together. Leaving felt like abandonment, like losing them twice, so he stayed and he worked and he kept moving. He ran a small herd, enough to keep him occupied. Sold beef to the army post at Fort Laramie twice a year. Broke horses sometimes for extra money. Kept to himself mostly. People in town knew him as quiet, reliable, not unfriendly, but not exactly friendly either. He attended church when he made it to town, helped neighbors when they needed it, paid his debts. But he didn't linger. Didn't socialize. Came home to the empty cabin and the empty days and told himself this was enough. It had to be enough, because wanting more meant risking more. And he'd already lost everything that mattered. The wind picked up, scattering the last of his coffee. Time to move. He had cattle to check before the storm hit, scattered in the draws and meadows within a few hours' ride. Most were hardy enough to survive anything Wyoming could throw at them, but he needed to know where they were, make sure none were caught somewhere dangerous. He went inside and banked the fire, left it low but alive. Put on his heavy coat, the one lined with sheepskin, wrapped a wool scarf around his neck, pulled his hat down tight, gloves, extra rope, knife, the repeating rifle he always carried, more out of habit than expectation of trouble. A man alone in winter didn't take chances. Buck was waiting in the barn, a big bay gelding with a white star on his forehead and the patience of a saint. 14 years old now, steady and smart. Jed had bought him as a 3-year-old, gentle broke him himself. Buck had carried him through every season since, never failed him once. In the 5 years of solitude, Buck was the closest thing Jed had to a friend. "Storm coming, boy," Jed said, saddling him with the ease of long practice. "Let's make this quick." Buck's ears flicked back, listening. He was already wearing his winter coat, thick and shaggy. He stamped once, ready to work. They rode out as the first flakes began to fall, small and hard, driven horizontal by the wind. The sky had lowered until it seemed to press down on the earth. Visibility was already dropping. Jed knew these lands like he knew his own heartbeat, every draw and ridge and stand of timber. He could find his way home in the dark if he had to, but he wanted to be back before this turned into a full whiteout. He found most of the cattle clustered in the lee of a rock outcropping, bunched together for warmth. 6 cows, good. That left 2 unaccounted for, probably in the timber to the west. He rode that direction, squinting against the snow that was coming harder now, thicker. The temperature was dropping fast. His breath plumed white. Ice was already forming on Buck's mane. This was going to be a bad one, the kind that locked down the territory for days or weeks. He'd seen it before. The isolation he'd chosen would become absolute. No one would get through to check on him, and he wouldn't get out. Alone with the storm and the memories. It was fine. He was used to it. He found one of the missing cows in a stand of aspen, then spent another half-hour hunting for the last one. Finally spotted her farther west than he'd expected, almost to the property line. Stubborn creature. He hazed her back toward the others, satisfied. 8 head, all accounted for. They'd find shelter and weather it through. He was turning Buck toward home when he saw the shape in the snow. At first he thought it was a fallen tree, dark against white. But something about it pulled at his attention. He urged Buck closer, and the shape resolved into something that made his chest tighten. A woman. Face down in the snow, one arm stretched out ahead of her. Dark hair tangled with ice. And next to her, half-covered already, 2 small forms. Children. Jed was off Buck before he consciously decided to dismount. He dropped to his knees beside the woman, pulled off his glove, pressed his fingers to her neck. Still warm. He felt a pulse, faint and slow, but there. She was alive, the children. He moved to them, found them clutched together, 2 little girls, maybe 4 or 5 years old. Identical faces, pale as death. He checked them both, found heartbeats in each, breathing so shallow he could barely detect it. But alive. They were alive. "Ma'am," he said, gripping the woman's shoulder. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" No response. Her lips were blue, her skin waxen. Hypothermia advanced. She'd been out here a while. The children too, how long? Where had they come from? There were no homesteads this direction for miles, questions for later. Right now they needed heat, needed it desperately, or they'd die right here in the snow. He looked around, saw no wagon, no horse, nothing to indicate how they'd gotten here or where they'd been going. Just 3 people dying in a storm, in the middle of nowhere. The snow was falling so thick now he could barely see 10 feet. The wind howled. The temperature was still dropping. He had maybe an hour of visibility left, maybe less. After that, finding his way home would be a gamble. He looked at the woman, the children. Looked at Buck, patient and waiting. 5 years he'd lived alone. 5 years he'd told himself he was done with caring, done with the risk of loss. 5 years of keeping everyone at arm's length, of building walls around what was left of his heart. But he'd been a father once. He'd been a husband. And before the grief had hollowed him out, he'd been a man who helped people, because that was what decent men did. He gathered up the first child, wrapped her in his coat, held her against his chest. Her skin was ice. She didn't stir. He settled her across Buck's saddle, then went back for the second child, gave her his scarf, positioned her with her sister. Then the woman. She was heavier, dead weight, unconscious. He managed to lift her, get her draped across Buck's withers. The horse stood steady, taking the weight without complaint. No way he could ride now. Buck was carrying too much. Jed would have to lead him, walk through the storm. An hour to get home, maybe more in this weather. Could he make it? Did he have a choice? He took Buck's reins, started walking south. The snow swallowed them immediately, a wall of white. He kept his head down, trusted his instincts, counted his steps. The wind tried to push him sideways. His feet were already numb in his boots. He walked and didn't think about anything except the next step and the next. Didn't think about who these people were or why he was doing this. Didn't think about the life he'd have to share, however briefly, with strangers. Didn't think about the cradle in his attic, the one he'd made before Mary was born. The one he'd never been able to throw away, just walked, leading Buck through the storm. 3 dying souls depending on him to get them home alive. The walk home took an eternity. Jed lost track of time in the white chaos, knew only that his legs kept moving, one foot in front of the other, and Buck kept following. The wind screamed. Snow plastered his face, worked its way into every gap in his clothing. His hands, even in gloves, had gone past cold into a distant burning ache. He nearly missed the cabin entirely, would have walked right past if Buck hadn't stopped and whinnied. Jed looked up, saw the dark shape of the barn emerging from the white. Home, thank God. He got Buck into the barn first, out of the wind. Left the horse standing with his precious cargo while Jed stumbled to the cabin, got the door open. The fire had held, the room was blessedly warm. He ran back to the barn, gathered up the first child, carried her inside, then the second. Then the woman who was so limp he feared she was already gone. He laid them on the floor in front of the fire, close enough for warmth, but not so close they'd burn. Their clothes were soaked through, frozen in places. He'd have to get them out of the wet things, or they'd never warm up. His hands shook as he worked, whether from cold or fear or something else he couldn't name. He'd seen men die from exposure before. Knew the signs. They were all 3 deep into it, bodies shutting down, core temperatures dangerously low. He might have found them too late, but he hadn't found them too late yet, and that meant he had to try. He started with the children because they were smallest, most vulnerable. Identical girls with dark hair and skin pale as milk. He stripped off their frozen dresses, their small boots, wrapped them in every blanket he owned, laid them side by side near the fire. They looked like little dolls, perfectly still, barely breathing. 4 years old, maybe 5. The same age Mary would have been. He pushed the thought away, turned to the woman. She was younger than he'd thought, maybe 30. Dark hair like the girls. Pretty features now slack with unconsciousness. He hesitated, knowing he had no choice, but also knowing the intimacy of what he was about to do. But propriety meant nothing if she died. He cut away her wet dress with his knife, tried not to look more than necessary, wrapped her in blankets and his own spare shirt. She wore a ring on her left hand, a simple gold band. Married then, or widowed? Where was her husband? Why was she out here alone, with 2 small children in the middle of a blizzard? Her fingers wouldn't let go of the ring even in unconsciousness. She clutched it like a lifeline. He lifted her onto his bed, the only real bed in the cabin, piled more blankets on her. Then he built up the fire until the room was almost hot, put water on to boil, moved the children closer to the warmth. And then he waited. Hours passed. The storm hammered the cabin, wind shrieking around the eaves. Snow piled against the windows. Inside, the fire crackled and the 3 strangers lay still as death, while Jed sat in his chair and watched them and felt something he'd sworn he'd never feel again. Fear, not for himself. For them, one of the children stirred first, made a small sound. Jed was beside her in an instant. She opened her eyes, blue and confused and terrified. She looked at him and started to cry, a thin, exhausted sound. "Easy now," Jed said softly. "You're safe. You're warm. Everything's all right," she cried harder, reaching for her sister. Jed moved them together, let them hold each other. The second child woke, and they clung to one another, both weeping, both shaking. "Your mama's right here," Jed said, pointing to the bed. "She's sleeping, but she's warm and safe. Just like you. Nobody's gonna hurt you." He had no idea if they understood him. They looked at him with enormous, frightened eyes, and held each other and shivered under the blankets. He heated milk, added honey, coaxed them to drink. They took small sips, watching him warily. He gave them bread softened in the milk, and they ate a little, mechanically. They didn't speak. Not a word. The woman woke near dusk, sudden and gasping. She tried to sit up, cried out, fell back. Jed was there, his hand on her shoulder. "Easy, Mom. You're safe. Your girls are safe, Emma," she whispered. "Lily. They're right here, see? Both of them, warm and fed." She turned her head, saw the children huddled by the fire. Relief broke across her face, then tears. She wept silently, her whole body shaking. "My husband," she whispered. "Thomas, Ma'am, right now you need to rest. You nearly froze to death. All three of you. You're safe now, but you need to get your strength back." "He's dead," she said, the words coming in broken gasps. "Thomas is dead. We were running. The storm. I couldn't keep going. You don't have to explain right now. Just rest." But she gripped his wrist with surprising strength, her eyes fierce despite her weakness. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for saving them. Whatever happens, thank you. Try to sleep," Jed said. "We'll talk when you're stronger." She closed her eyes, still holding his wrist, and drifted off again. Jed sat back, looked at the three of them. The children had fallen asleep in each other's arms. The woman breathed steadily now, some color returning to her face. They'd live. All three of them would live. He'd done it. He'd brought them home through the storm, warmed them, fed them, pulled them back from the edge. They'd live, and now what? The storm showed no signs of stopping. Through the window, he could see nothing but white. This could last days, a week, maybe more. He couldn't take them anywhere, couldn't get word to anyone. They were trapped here together, three strangers in his home, in the space he'd kept sacred and empty. The children's clothes hung drying by the fire, small dresses worn but carefully mended. The woman's dress, too, patched in places. Poor then, traveling alone with two children, running from something. A dead husband. A dangerous situation, none of his business. He'd saved their lives. That was enough. When the storm cleared, he'd take them to town, help them get settled somewhere, send them on their way. A few days, a week at most. He could manage that. Then everything would go back to the way it was, alone, quiet, safe. He looked at the children sleeping peacefully now, their faces so innocent and trusting. Looked at the woman in his bed, her hand still clutching that gold ring. Looked at the storm outside, sealing them all in together. Something deep in his chest, something he thought had frozen solid 5 years ago, shifted. Not melting, not yet, but shifting. A crack in the ice. He stood, went to check on Buck in the barn. The horse was fine, already eating hay, content to be out of the weather. Jed stood with him for a while, one hand on Buck's warm neck, listening to the storm. "What have I done?" he asked the horse. Buck had no answer, just kept eating hay, patient and unconcerned. Jed returned to the cabin, barred the door against the storm, and settled in for what promised to be a very long night. Outside, the wind howled and the snow fell without mercy. Inside, the fire burned warm, and 3 people he didn't know slept under his roof, depending on him for everything. He'd forgotten what that felt like. Forgotten the weight of it, the responsibility. Forgotten what it meant to have lives in his hands, to matter to someone, to be needed. He'd forgotten, and he wasn't sure he wanted to remember. Morning came grey and furious. The storm had not eased one bit. Snow had drifted halfway up the cabin's windows, and the wind still shrieked like something wild and hurt. Jed woke in his chair by the fire, stiff and cold, despite the blankets he'd wrapped around himself. He'd given up his bed without question, slept sitting up. It was nothing. He'd slept in worse places. The woman, he still didn't know her name, was awake. She sat on the edge of the bed, wrapped in blankets, watching her daughters sleep. She looked fragile in the morning light, her face drawn and exhausted, but there was steel in her eyes that hadn't been there last night. "Morning," Jed said quietly. She turned, offered a small nod. "Morning. Thank you for the bed. You didn't have to. Had to put you somewhere," he said, practical. "How are you feeling?" "Better, stronger," she paused. "My name is Nora, Nora Brennan. These are my daughters, Emma and Lily, Jedediah Cole. Most folks call me Jed, Mr. Cole. I can't begin to tell you what you've done for us. You saved our lives. If you hadn't found us—" "Storm's still bad," he interrupted, uncomfortable with gratitude. "We're snowed in. Could be days before it clears. You and the girls need to stay warm, build your strength back up. There's food enough." She stood, wavered slightly, but steadied herself. "Then I should help. I can't just lie here while you— Mom, you nearly died yesterday, and you saved me. Let me at least earn my keep." There was pride in her voice, firm and unyielding. "I can cook. I can clean. I can make myself useful," he wanted to argue, but he recognized the look on her face. She needed this. Needed to not be helpless, not be a burden. He understood that. Pride was sometimes all a person had left. "Coffee's on the stove," he said. "Help yourself. There's salt pork and beans in the cupboard, cornmeal, some potatoes." She nodded, moved slowly toward the stove. The children were stirring now, sitting up, looking around with those same enormous, wary eyes. They saw their mother and relaxed slightly, but they watched Jed like he might be dangerous. He gave them space, went outside to check the livestock. The cold hit him like a fist. Snow was still falling thick and fast. He could barely see the barn. He plowed through drifts that came to his thighs, got the barn door open, found Buck comfortable, and the chickens huddled together but alive. He milked the cow, fed everyone, gathered eggs, hauled water from the creek that was still somehow not frozen solid. By the time he got back inside, stamping snow off his boots, the smell of coffee and frying salt pork filled the cabin. Nora had found things, was moving around the kitchen area with quiet competence despite her obvious exhaustion. The children sat at the table watching. "They don't talk," Nora said softly. "Not since their father died. The doctor said it was the shock." "How long ago?" 6 months. Her voice went flat. "Mining accident, rockfall. He died right away, they said. Didn't suffer. I'm sorry." She nodded, kept working. "I found your wife's recipe book," she said, gesturing to a small handwritten journal on the shelf. "I hope you don't mind. I wanted to make biscuits, but I wasn't sure of your oven." Sarah's book. He'd forgotten it was there, tucked among the supplies. Sarah had been a wonderful cook, had written down all her recipes in neat handwriting, notes about temperatures and timing. He hadn't looked at it in 5 years. "That's fine," he managed. "Use whatever you need." Nora opened the book carefully, reverently, as if she understood it was precious. She read one of the pages, smiled slightly. "She writes like a friend," she said. "Like she's talking to you while you cook. She must have been lovely." "She was," Jed said, and had to turn away, busy himself with hanging up his coat. They ate in awkward silence. The biscuits were good, maybe not quite like Sarah's, but close enough to bring back memories he'd spent years trying to forget. The children ate slowly, their eyes never leaving Jed. They were afraid of him, he realized. Afraid of this strange man in this strange place. "It's all right," Nora told them softly. "Mr. Cole is our friend. He saved us, remember? He brought us somewhere warm and safe. Emma, or was it Lily?" Shook her head slightly. The other one pressed closer to her sister. "They're not used to strangers," Nora said apologetically. "And after Thomas died, some men came. His business partner. He wanted to take them away from me. Said I couldn't care for them properly. We've been running ever since. Who was this partner?" "Carlton Reeves. Thomas and he owned a silver mine together. Small operation, never made much money. After Thomas died, Reeves said the girls should go to an orphanage, that I wasn't fit. But they're my girls. I couldn't let him take them. You have any legal right to them?" "No, but he has money, connections. He was going to take them anyway, I could see it. So I took what little we had and ran." She looked at him directly. "I didn't know where I was going. Just away. The storm came up so fast. I thought we were going to die out there. You nearly did." "I know." She set down her coffee cup. "Mr. Cole, I don't know what happens when this storm clears. I don't have money. I don't have anywhere to go, but I'll find a way to repay you. I promise. We'll figure it out, Jed said, though he had no idea how. For now, you just need to rest and get strong. The day passed slowly. The storm gave no sign of ending. Jed kept the fire going, brought in more wood, tended the animals. Nora insisted on helping, despite her weakness, tidying the cabin, washing dishes, mending clothes. The children stayed close to her, silent and watchful. In the evening, after a simple supper, Jed found Nora sitting by the window, staring out at the endless white. "I'm sorry," she said, "for intruding on your life like this. Wasn't your choice. No, but still." She paused. "You live here alone?" 5 years now. That's a long time." He didn't answer. Didn't want to explain about Sarah and the children, about how alone had felt safer than the alternative. She seemed to understand anyway. "Sometimes alone is easier," she said quietly. "Doesn't hurt as much when there's no one to lose." He looked at her then, really looked at her. Saw someone who understood, someone who'd lost and kept going anyway. "The girls will talk again," he said. "Just takes time. I hope so. They used to chatter like little birds. Drove Thomas to distraction sometimes, all their questions and stories. Now it's like they're locked inside themselves. They're scared. World turned dangerous on them. They'll come back when they feel safe again. You sound like you know about such things." "I've seen hard times," he said simply. She nodded, turned back to the window. Outside, the storm howled on, sealing them in this small, warm space together. 3 strangers and 2 silent children, all of them carrying grief, all of them learning to exist in the same space. It should have felt wrong, invasive. Instead, it felt like something Jed couldn't name, something he wasn't ready to examine too closely. He stood, went to tend the fire. Behind him, Nora began humming softly, something gentle and sad. One of the girls made a small sound, almost like a sigh, and the snow kept falling, piling deeper, making sure none of them were going anywhere for a good long while. 3 days passed. The storm showed no mercy, just kept coming, wave after wave of snow and wind. Jed had seen bad winters, but this was something else. The drifts were higher than his head in places. The world had shrunk to just the cabin and the barn, and even getting between them was a battle. But inside, something was shifting. The children were still mostly silent, but they'd stopped looking at Jed like he might hurt them. They watched him with curiosity now. When he came in from tending the animals, they'd glance up from whatever quiet game they were playing. When he sat by the fire in the evening, they'd inch a little closer. Not quite brave enough to approach, but not fleeing either. Progress, small as it was. Nora had taken over most of the cooking, insisted on it despite Jed's protests. She moved through the small kitchen with easy competence, making meals from his simple stores. She'd found Sarah's herb jars, used them to season the salt pork and beans. She baked bread that was better than anything Jed had managed in years. She even made a stew that reminded him so much of Sarah's cooking it hurt, but it was a good hurt. The kind that meant he was still alive enough to feel. On the 4th day, Lily, he'd learned to tell them apart now. Lily had a small scar on her chin, came up to him while he was oiling a saddle. "Your horse," she said, her voice tiny and unused. "What's his name?" Jed looked up, careful not to show his surprise. First words he'd heard from either of them. "Buck," he said. "He's a good horse. Best I ever had. Can I see him?" Nora appeared from the kitchen, her face bright with hope and fear. "Lily, honey, it's too cold outside. She can come to the barn," Jed said. "I'll bundle her up good. If it's all right with you." Nora nodded, blinking back tears. Yes, of course." So Jed wrapped Lily in blankets and carried her through the snow to the barn. Emma followed with Nora, the 4 of them making their slow way through the white. Inside the barn, out of the wind, Buck stood in his stall contentedly chewing hay. He turned his big head when they entered, ears forward, curious. "Can I touch him?" Lily whispered. "Sure you can. He's gentle." "Won't hurt you." Jed lifted her up so she could reach Buck's nose. The horse snuffled at her, warm breath steaming in the cold. Lily giggled, an actual giggle bright as bells, and touched his soft muzzle with one small hand. "He's warm," she said. "Horses are good that way. Warm and steady." Emma tugged on Jed's coat. He looked down at her, saw her pointing at Buck, her eyes asking permission. "Your turn," he said, and lifted her up too. Emma touched Buck's nose, then his forelock, running her small fingers through his mane. Buck stood perfectly still, patient as stone. Emma's face transformed, a smile breaking through like sun after storm. Nora stood back, watching, tears running down her face. She didn't bother to hide them. They stayed in the barn for a while, the children petting Buck, asking questions that Jed answered with a patience he'd forgotten he had. Yes, Buck liked apples. Yes, he could run very fast. Yes, Jed had had him a long time. Yes, they were friends. When they finally made it back to the cabin, everyone was laughing, even Nora. Something had broken loose in all of them. Some tightness had eased. That night, after the children had fallen asleep, Jed and Nora sat by the fire, as had become their habit. She was mending clothes, he was whittling. He'd started a project that afternoon. Hadn't quite admitted to himself what he was making. But the shape was emerging now, clear and undeniable. A horse. Small, simple, the size of a child's hand. That's beautiful, Nora said softly. For the girls. Thought they might like it. They will. They already love Buck, and you, though they're too shy to show it yet. He kept whittling, didn't answer that. May I ask you something? Nora said after a while. Go ahead. You said you've been alone 5 years. Was it your wife? He nodded, throat tight. And children? 2, Mary and James. I'm so sorry. Typhoid. Came through fast. They were gone before I could even get them to a doctor. All 3 of them. The knife slipped, cut his thumb. He swore softly, wrapped it in his handkerchief. Let me see, Nora said, coming over. She examined his hand with gentle efficiency, cleaned the cut with water, wrapped it properly. You need to be more careful. I'm fine. You're stubborn, is what you are. But she was smiling slightly. Thomas was the same way. Wouldn't admit he was hurt or sick until he couldn't stand anymore. Men, how'd you meet him? At a church social. I was 17, he was 20. He was funny and kind, and he loved me completely. We had 12 good years together. Her smile faded. Not enough. Never enough time. No, Jed agreed. Never is. They sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the storm, the fire, the soft breathing of sleeping children. I don't want to intrude on your life, Nora said eventually. But I'm grateful to be here. Grateful for your kindness. The girls are healing. I can see it. They're coming back to themselves. They're good girls. They are. She paused. You must miss your children terribly. Every day. Do you ever wish you'd had more? After, I mean? Couldn't, he said simply. Couldn't risk loving someone again, just to lose them. So you chose to be alone. Seemed safer, is it? Safer, he thought about that. I don't know anymore. She nodded, went back to her mending. Jed returned to his whittling. He finished the first horse, started on a second. One for each girl. They'd need to be identical, carefully matched. Fair. He worked late into the night. After Nora had gone to bed on the floor near the girls, she'd insisted, said it was warmer there anyway. The fire burned low. The storm raged on, and Jed carved 2 small horses with patient hands, thinking about laughter in his barn and small fingers touching. Buck's nose and the way silence could break into something like joy, when he finally set the finished horses on the mantel and went to sleep in his chair. He dreamed for the first time in years of something other than loss. He dreamed of spring coming, of green grass and warm sun, of children laughing and running, and a house full of life. He woke with tears on his face and terror in his heart, because wanting things again meant they could be taken away. But the fear wasn't strong enough to make him wish he'd never found them in the snow. Not anymore. On the 14th day, the storm finally broke. Jed woke to silence, real silence, not the howling fury that had been their constant companion. He stood, looked out the window and saw blue sky. Pale winter blue, but sky nonetheless. The sun was rising over the eastern hills, painting the endless white landscape in shades of pink and gold. It's over, Nora said from behind him. She'd come to stand beside him, wrapped in a blanket. Thank God. Still a lot of snow, Jed said. Roads will be buried, but it's over, yes. They stood together, watching the sunrise, and Jed felt the weight of what came next, settling on his shoulders. The storm had been a kind of suspension, a time outside of time. Now reality would return. Decisions would have to be made. Nora and the girls couldn't stay here forever. Could they? I need to check the cattle, he said. See what survived. Will you be gone long? Few hours, maybe? I'll follow my fence line as far as I can ride. Be careful. He nodded, started preparing for the ride. Emma and Lily woke while he was saddling Buck, came running out in their nightgowns despite the cold. Mr. Jed, Lily called. Are you leaving? Just for a little while. Going to check on the cows. Can we come? Emma asked, her voice still soft and uncertain, but there. She was talking now too, more each day. Too cold, little one. And Buck can't carry all of us through those drifts. But I'll be back before supper, promise. You promise. Lily pressed. I promise. They seemed satisfied with that. Let Nora herd them back inside. But their worry touched something in Jed. They were afraid he'd leave and not come back. Afraid to trust that good things lasted. He understood that fear intimately. The ride took longer than expected. Snow had drifted deep in places, and Buck had to work hard to break through. Jed found most of his small herd alive but thin. 2 were dead, frozen in a ravine where they'd sheltered. It could have been worse. Much worse. He also found that the farthest reaches of his property were completely cut off. It would be weeks before anyone could get through those drifts without serious effort. The town was probably reachable on horseback if a man knew the trails, but barely. Taking women and children? Not yet. Not for a while. They were still trapped here, just in a different way. He wasn't sure how he felt about that. When he got home, the smell of baking bread greeted him. Emma and Lily were playing with the wooden horses he'd made, trotting them across the floor, making soft, whinnying sounds. Nora was at the stove, and she smiled when he came in, a smile that made something in his chest ache. How were they? She asked. Lost 2. The rest will make it. I'm sorry, he shrugged. That's ranching. You plan for losses. Still hard, I imagine. Everything's hard out here. You do what you can and accept what you can't change. She nodded, turned back to the stove. Supper will be ready soon. I made a pot roast with the last of the carrots. You didn't have to. I wanted to. Let me do this, Jed. Let me contribute something. It was the first time she'd called him just Jed, not Mr. Cole. Something about it felt significant, intimate. That evening, after the children were asleep, Jed did something he hadn't done in years. He went to the wooden box on the high shelf, the one he kept locked away, and brought it down. Inside was a tin daguerreotype in a leather case, along with a few other precious things. Locks of hair, letters, the deed to his land. He opened the case, looked at the image for the first time in a long time. Sarah, beautiful and serious in her best dress, standing beside him. In front of them, Mary and James, dressed in their Sunday clothes, solemn for the camera. His family, gone. May I? Nora asked quietly. He handed her the case. She studied the image carefully, respectfully. They were beautiful, she said. You all were. What a handsome family. Mary was 7. James was 5. Sarah was 32. Too young. All of them too young. Yes, she handed the case back, but he shook his head. You can look longer if you want. I don't want to intrude on your grief. You're not. He sat down heavily. I don't know. I think maybe I've been holding it too tight. All of it. The grief, the anger, the loneliness. Like if I let go even a little, I'd lose them completely. But you can't lose someone you've already lost, Nora said gently. They're gone. You carrying that pain doesn't bring them back. It just makes you suffer alone. I know that. In my head, I know that. But knowing and feeling are different things. She sat beside him, not touching but close. Thomas used to say that grief is love with nowhere to go. That it's not the opposite of love, it's part of it. The price we pay for caring. He sounds like he was a wise man. He tried to be. Didn't always succeed, but he tried. She paused. Jed, I need to tell you something. About why I'm here, why we ran. You told me. This Reeves fellow wanted the girls. There's more to it. Thomas had no money when he died. The mine was worth nothing. But Reeves, he kept saying he'd take care of things, take care of us. Started coming by too often, looking at the girls in a way that made my skin crawl. Said they needed a man's guidance, said I couldn't raise them proper. Jed's jaw tightened. What kind of guidance? I don't know. I didn't wait to find out. I took the girls and what little we had and left in the middle of the night. He filed papers claiming I was unfit, that he had the right as Thomas's partner. I don't know if that's legal or not, but he has lawyers and I have nothing. You have me, Jed said, and the words were out before he could stop them. She looked at him, her eyes wide. What? I mean, while you're here, you have my protection. Whatever that's worth. It's worth everything, she whispered. They were close now, closer than he'd realized. He could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, the way her lips were slightly parted. She smelled like bread and wood smoke and something sweet he couldn't name. He wanted to kiss her, wanted it with an intensity that shocked him. Mama. Lily's voice, sleepy and small, came from across the room. I had a bad dream. The moment broke. Nora stood quickly, went to her daughter, gathered her up. It's all right, sweetheart. Mama's here? Jed sat back, his heart pounding. What had he been thinking? She was vulnerable, dependent on him. He couldn't take advantage of that. Couldn't mistake gratitude for something more. But as Nora settled Lily back to sleep and returned to her own bedroll, she caught his eye across the fire. And the look she gave him said maybe it hadn't been just gratitude. Maybe it had been something real. He lay awake long into the night, the daguerreotype still in his hand, thinking about ghosts and grief and the terrifying possibility of wanting someone again. 2 days after the storm broke, Jed knew he had to go to town. They were running low on essentials, flour, coffee, sugar, and he needed to hear news, find out if anyone had been asking about a woman and 2 children. Better to know what he was dealing with than to wait blindly for trouble. I'll be back before dark, he told Nora that morning. Keep the door barred while I'm gone. Don't open it for anyone. You think someone might come? Just being careful, but the worry was clear in her eyes. Emma and Lily clung to his legs when he tried to leave, making him promise again and again that he'd come back. I will, he told them, crouching down to their level. I'm just going to town to get supplies. Some flour for your mama to make bread, maybe some peppermint candy if they have it. I'll be back for supper, all right? Promise? Lily asked. I promise on Buck's life, and you know Buck's important to me. That seemed to satisfy them. They let him go, but they stood at the window watching as he rode away, and he felt the weight of their trust like a physical thing. The ride to town took 3 hours through the snow. The main trail had been broken by others, ranchers checking on their herds, townspeople venturing out. Jed passed 2 neighbors, exchanged brief greetings but didn't linger. He wasn't ready for questions. Twin Forks was a small town, maybe 300 people, built around a trading post that had grown into a general store. There was a church, a saloon, a blacksmith, a livery, and a scattering of houses. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business. For better or worse, Jed tied Buck at the hitching post outside Miller's general store and went in. Mrs. Miller was behind the counter. A round woman with sharp eyes and a kind heart. Jedediah Cole, she said, smiling. Survived the storm, I see. Just barely. Need to stock up. He gave her his list, watched as she gathered things. Flour, cornmeal, coffee, beans, salt. He added things he hadn't planned on. Good fabric for making dresses, ribbon for hair, peppermint sticks. A storybook with colorful pictures. A comb with mother-of-pearl inlay. Mrs. Miller raised an eyebrow at the additions, but didn't comment. You heard any news? Jed asked casually. Anyone come through recently? Strange, you should ask. Fellow came through 3 days before the storm, asking questions. Well-dressed man, city type, asking about a woman with 2 little girls. Said they were his wards, that the woman had stolen them away. Jed's blood ran cold. What'd you tell him? Told him I hadn't seen any such person. Most folks said the same. We take care of our own here, and something about that man didn't sit right. Too smooth. Too entitled. She looked at Jed directly. You know anything about this? Might, Jed admitted. Woman and her girls are at my place. Storm caught them. I brought them in. She steal those children. No, ma'am. They're her daughters. Well, her nieces, truth be told, but she's been raising them since their mother died. This man, he's not family. He's trouble. Mrs. Miller nodded slowly. Thought as much. You need any help, you let folks know. We don't take kindly to strangers coming here and making threats. Appreciate that. He paid for his supplies, loaded them on Buck, and was turning to leave when a man stepped out of the saloon across the street. Well dressed, just like Mrs. Miller had said. Dark coat, polished boots. He looked out of place in the frontier town. The man's eyes fixed on Jed, and something in his expression changed. Recognition, maybe, or calculation. Jed climbed onto Buck, kept his movements casual, but his hand stayed near his rifle. The man started walking toward him. "Excuse me," the man called. "Could I have a word?" "Busy," Jed said, turning Buck. "It's about a woman and 2 children. I'm looking for my wards. They've run away, and I'm very concerned for their safety." Jed stopped, looked back. "Haven't seen anyone like that." "You're sure?" "The storm was very bad. If someone had taken them in, I said I haven't seen anyone. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get home before dark." He rode off before the man could say anything else, but he felt eyes on his back all the way out of town. That was Reeves, had to be. And now he knew someone was asking questions, even if he didn't know it was Jed specifically. The ride home felt longer than the ride out. Jed kept looking behind him, making sure he wasn't followed. The sun was low by the time he saw his cabin in the distance, smoke rising from the chimney. The door flew open before he'd even dismounted. Emma and Lily came running, laughing and calling his name. Nora stood on the porch, her hand over her mouth, relief clear on her face. "You're back," Lily shouted, grabbing his leg. "You came back?" "Told you I would." He laughed, ruffling her hair. "Help me unload and I'll show you what I brought." They carried supplies inside, like it was Christmas morning. The girls shrieked with joy over the peppermint candy, marveled at the storybook, touched the ribbons with reverent fingers. Nora held up the fabric, tears in her eyes. "Jed, this is too much," she said. "You didn't have to." "Wanted to," he said simply. "Figured the girls needed some things that were theirs, and you could use a proper dress. I don't know what to say. Don't have to say anything." That evening, Nora took out an old quilt from the chest at the foot of the bed. It had been Sarah's, pieced together from scraps over years. Time and use had worn it thin in places, torn it in others. "Would you mind if I mended this?" Nora asked. "Added some new patches? It's too beautiful to let fall apart." Jed looked at the quilt, saw Sarah's careful stitches, the patterns she'd chosen. Saw also that it was just cloth, just thread. Sarah was gone. The quilt was here, and maybe it could be something new without erasing what it had been. "Go ahead," he said. "Make it yours." She smiled, began laying out pieces of the new fabric, planning where they'd go. The girls helped, choosing colors, watching as their mother worked. It was domestic and peaceful and achingly normal. That night, after everyone was asleep, Jed woke to whispered voices. Emma and Lily talking in the darkness. "Do you think Mr. Jed likes us?" Emma asked. "I think so. He brought us candy. And the book. Do you think he could be our papa? Like our real papa, but new?" "I don't know." "Do you think God would let us have another papa?" "Maybe. Mama says God is kind. Maybe he'd let us keep this one. Should we pray?" "Yes, let's pray." And they did, their small voices earnest and hopeful, asking God to let Mr. Jed stay, to let them stay with him, to let them be a family. Jed lay in his chair, listening, his heart breaking and mending at the same time. These children wanted him, wanted to call him Papa, and God help him, he wanted it too. But wanting and having were different things. There was still Reeves to deal with, still the question of what was legal and what was right, still the terror of opening his heart again. He looked over at Nora, silhouetted by the dying fire, her needle flashing as she repaired the quilt, making something broken into something whole again. Maybe, he thought, maybe it was possible. Spring was coming. You could feel it in the air, see it in the way the snow was melting. Hear it in the creek running high with snowmelt. The world was waking up, and with it, decisions could no longer be postponed. Jed knew what he wanted. The realization had come gradually, then all at once. He wanted Nora and the girls to stay, not as guests, not as charity cases, as his family. He wanted to marry Nora, adopt the girls, make it all legal and permanent and real. He'd fought against it for weeks, telling himself it was too fast, too risky, too foolish. But the heart wants what it wants, and his heart wanted them. He found Nora alone one afternoon while the girls were napping. She was working on the quilt again, adding a new patch of blue calico that matched Emma's eyes. "Nora," he said, "can we talk?" She looked up, set aside her sewing. "Of course." "Is something wrong?" "No, maybe the opposite." He sat down across from her, tried to find the right words. "I've been thinking about what happens next, when the road's clear completely, when you and the girls have to decide where to go. I've been thinking about that too." Her voice was quiet. "I don't want to leave, Jed. The girls are happy here. They feel safe. They're healing, but I know we can't stay forever. I know you have your own life and we're not part of that. What if you were?" She stared at him. "What? What if you stayed? What if you married me and we made this a real family? I could adopt the girls, give them my name, give them a home. We could be—" He stopped, his courage faltering. "A family," she whispered. "You're asking me to marry you." "I am." "I know it's sudden." "I know we've only known each other a few weeks. But Nora, I care about you, about the girls. I want to protect you, provide for you. I want to wake up to your coffee and Emma's laughter and Lily's questions. I want to teach them to ride and read them stories and watch them grow up safe and loved. I want—" His voice broke. "I want to be their father. If you'll let me." Tears streamed down Nora's face. She reached for him, took his hands in hers. "Jedi, there's something I have to tell you. Something I should have told you before." The fear in her voice stopped him cold. "What is it?" She stood, went to her pack in the corner, pulled out a folded paper. She came back, handed it to him with shaking hands. "Read this first." It was a legal document, official-looking, stamped and signed. Jed read it slowly, his stomach sinking with each line. "Carlton Reeves, petitioning for guardianship of minors Emma Margaret Brennan and Lily Rose Brennan, claiming the girl's current guardian, Nora Catherine Brennan, was unfit. Claiming he, as the business partner of the girl's father, Thomas James Brennan, had a vested interest in their welfare." And further down, a detail that made Jed's blood run cold. "Nora Catherine Brennan, sister-in-law to the deceased Thomas James Brennan, aunt to the minor children, not their mother. Their aunt." He looked up at Nora, who was crying in earnest now. "I lied to you," she said. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. They're not my daughters. They're my sister Margaret's children." Margaret was Thomas's wife. She died giving birth to a third child. The baby died too. Thomas never recovered. He started drinking, stopped taking care of things. When he died in that mining accident 6 months later, I took the girls. They had no one else. Margaret and I were orphans, no other family. I couldn't let them be taken by strangers, put in some institution. Why didn't you tell me? Jed's voice was steady, but he felt like the ground was shifting beneath him. "Because I was afraid. Afraid you'd turn us away if you knew I had no legal right to them. Afraid you'd think I was a kidnapper or a liar, which I suppose I am." She wrapped her arms around herself. "Reeves filed those papers 2 weeks after Thomas died. Said I was too young, unmarried, with no means to care for them properly. He wanted them in an orphanage, said it was for the best. But I knew, I saw how he looked at them, Jed. Something was wrong. So I took them and ran." Jed stood, paced to the window, looked out at the melting snow. His mind was racing. Not their mother, aunt, no legal claim. Reeves had papers, had a case. This was more complicated than he'd thought. "Say something," Nora pleaded. "Please." He turned back to her. "You thought I'd care whether they came from your womb or your sister's?" "I what?" "You think that matters to me? Whether you're their mother or their aunt? They're children who need a home. You're a woman who loves them and protects them. That's what matters. But the law, to hell with the law." The words came out fierce. "I don't care what some paper says. Those girls are yours in every way that counts. You've been caring for them, loving them, keeping them safe. That makes you their mother, Jed. And if you think this changes what I feel, you're wrong. I still want to marry you. I still want to adopt them. We'll fight Reeves. We'll get lawyers, file papers, do whatever it takes. But I'm not letting that man take them. Not now. Not ever," Nora sobbed, covering her face with her hands. "You don't understand. He has money, connections. He can make this very difficult. I don't care if he's the damn governor. Those girls are staying here." He went to her, pulled her hands from her face, made her look at him. "Do you want to marry me, honestly? Not because you need protection, not because you're grateful. Do you want this?" "Yes," she whispered. "God help me, yes. I love you, Jed. I know it's too soon and maybe it's wrong, but I do. I love your kindness and your strength and the way you look at my girls like they're precious. I love waking up in your home and making coffee in your kitchen and watching you carve little horses by the fire. I love all of it. I want to stay forever. Then we will, together, we'll make this legal and permanent. We'll build a wall around this family that Reeves can't break through. How? We'll go to town tomorrow. Talk to the judge. File for marriage and adoption all at once. Get Sheriff Tucker involved. Make sure everyone knows the girls are under my protection now." His jaw set in determination. "Reeves wants a fight. He'll get one. But he's not taking our daughters. Our daughters." The words hung in the air between them, weighty with promise. "Are you sure?" Nora asked. "This could get ugly, expensive. He could make your life very difficult." "I'm sure." He pulled her close, held her tight. "I've already lost one family. I'll be damned if I lose another. We do this right. We do this legal. And we do it fast before Reeves figures out where you are." She nodded against his chest. "He might already know. That man you saw in town, I know. Which is why we move now." He tipped her chin up, looked into her eyes. "I love you, Nora. I know it's fast and maybe crazy, but I do. And I love those girls like they're my own blood. We're going to be a family, real and legal and permanent. You believe me? I believe you. Then trust me. We'll figure this out." She kissed him then, soft and brief and full of promise. When she pulled back, she was smiling through her tears. "When do we leave for town?" "First light. I'll talk to Judge Morrison, see what can be done. We'll need witnesses for the wedding. Maybe the sheriff and his wife will stand up for us. That fast?" "That fast. No point waiting. The sooner you're my wife and they're my daughters in the eyes of the law, the stronger our position." That night, Jed lay awake, making plans. He'd need to see the judge, the lawyer, the sheriff, file papers, make declarations. Establish that Nora had been caring for the girls, that he was taking responsibility. Create a legal shield. He looked over at Nora and the girls, all sleeping peacefully. His family, almost. Soon, Reeves could come. Let him come. He'd find out what it meant to threaten Jedediah Cole's family. The old cowboy might be gray and weathered, but he still had fight in him. He'd protect what was his, and these three, these precious souls sleeping in his home, they were his now. He'd make sure of it. They rode to town at dawn, all four of them on Buck and the cow. Jed had debated leaving Nora and the girls behind, but decided against it. Safer to keep them close where he could protect them. The morning was crisp and clear, the kind of spring day that promised better times ahead. Judge Herbert Morrison lived above the Mercantile, served Twin Forks and the surrounding ranches as circuit judge. He was 70 years old, sharp as a tack, and known for being fair-minded. If anyone could help them, it was him. Jed knocked on his door at 7 in the morning. The judge answered in his shirt sleeves, reading spectacles perched on his nose. "Jedediah Cole," he said, surprised. "What brings you here so early?" "Need your help, Judge. Legal matters. Important ones." The judge looked past him, saw Nora and the girls standing nervously by the horses. His expression shifted to understanding. "Come in, all of you. Let me put coffee on." They sat in the judge's small parlor while he listened to the whole story. Nora's sister dying, Thomas's death, Reeves filing for guardianship, their flight, the storm. Everything. Jed explained his intention to marry Nora and adopt the girls, asked what needed to be done legally. Judge Morrison sat back, steepled his fingers. "Reeves filed in Colorado Territory Court, which has no jurisdiction here in Wyoming. That's in your favor. However, he could file here as well. And if he can prove Miss Brennan is unfit or that he has superior claim, he might succeed." "She's not unfit," Jed said firmly. "She's been caring for those girls for 6 months, giving them everything she has." "I can see that." "The question is what the law says. Now, if you two were married and you filed for adoption, that changes things considerably. A married couple with means, a stable home, blood relation on the wife's side. That's a strong claim. Stronger than a business partner with no family ties. How fast can we do this? The marriage? I can perform the ceremony today if you have your license. You'll need to file at the county clerk's office, pay the fee, bring 2 witnesses. The adoption will take longer, paperwork, waiting periods. But we can start the process immediately. What about Reeves? If he shows up, I'll speak with Sheriff Tucker. Make sure he understands the situation. If Reeves tries to take those children by force, he'll be breaking the law, regardless of what papers he filed elsewhere. Jed stood, offered his hand. Thank you, Judge. Don't thank me yet. This could get complicated, but you're doing the right thing, son. Those girls need a home, and from what I can see, you and Miss Brennan can provide that. They went to the county clerk next, filed for a marriage license. The clerk, a pinched-faced woman named Mrs. Henderson, looked at them skeptically but processed the paperwork. $3 fee, a waiting period waived by judge's order, license issued on the spot, then to Sheriff Dale Tucker's office. Tucker was a former Army scout, tough and practical, with a reputation for keeping the peace. He listened to their story with his feet up on his desk, face expressionless. "This Reeves character," he said when they finished. "I didn't like him when he came through asking questions. Something slippery about him. You say he filed for guardianship?" "Yes, sir," Nora said. "In Colorado?" "I don't know if it's legal or not. Probably not worth the paper it's printed on, jurisdiction-wise. But he could cause trouble anyway. Rich men usually can." Tucker dropped his feet, sat up straight. "Here's what we'll do. I'll ride out to your place this evening, Jed. Be there for the wedding, act as official witness. If Reeves shows up, he'll find himself facing the law before he lays a hand on those children. Appreciate it, Sheriff. We look after our own here. Those girls are under your protection now, which makes them under mine too." The last stop was the lawyer's office. Samuel Wright was young, ambitious, fresh from back east with newfound law degree. He took their case with enthusiasm. Adoption proceedings will require testimony from character witnesses, proof of stable income and housing, medical examination of the children to show they're being properly cared for, and a formal petition to the territorial court. Judge Morrison can fast-track it given the circumstances, but it'll still take a few weeks minimum. "We have weeks?" Jed asked. "Once you're married and the petition is filed, Reeves's claim becomes much weaker. He'd have to prove you're unfit, which seems unlikely. And if he tries to remove the children before the court rules, he'll be charged with kidnapping. What about my homestead? If something happens to me, we should draw up a will. Leave everything to your wife. Ensure the children are provided for." "I can have that done by tomorrow." Jed agreed, paid the retainer fee, shook hands. They had a plan now. Legal protection, official support. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. They rode home in the afternoon, Nora sitting close to Jed, the girls chattering excitedly about the wedding. It was happening. Tomorrow they'd be a real family in the eyes of God and the law. Back at the cabin, Nora went through her few possessions, pulled out a dress she'd been saving. It was old, carefully preserved. Had been her sister Margaret's, dark blue with ivory lace at the collar and cuffs. She pressed it with a heated iron, her hands trembling slightly. "Margaret would have wanted this," she said softly. "Would have wanted me to be happy, to take care of her girls. I think she'd approve of you." "I hope so," Jed said. He'd brought out Sarah's Bible, the big leather-bound one that contained the family records, births, deaths, marriages. He'd have to add new names soon. The thought didn't hurt as much as he'd expected. Sarah would have approved too, he thought. She'd always had a soft heart for children. That evening, Jed was in the barn tending Buck when he heard horses approaching. Multiple horses. His hand went to his rifle, and he moved to the barn door cautiously. 3 men rode into his yard. The one in front was well-dressed, the same man Jed had seen in town. Reeves. The 2 with him looked like hired muscle. Hard men with guns on their hips. Jed stepped out of the barn, rifle held casually but ready. "Help you, gentlemen." Reeves dismounted, put on a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Cole, I believe. I'm Carlton Reeves. I'm looking for my wards, 2 young girls who were taken by their aunt, Nora Brennan. I have reason to believe they may be here. Don't know what you're talking about, Jed said evenly. Come now, Mr. Cole. I've made inquiries. You brought supplies for children. You've been seen with a woman and 2 girls. Don't insult my intelligence, my property, my business. Time for you to leave, Reeves's smile vanished. Those children are my legal wards. I have papers filed in the wrong territory by a man with no blood relation to those girls. Your papers mean nothing here. How dare you? The cabin door opened. Nora stepped out, her face pale but determined. It's all right, Jed. He knows anyway. Nora! Reeves's voice turned syrupy. Thank God, I've been so worried. Come, bring the girls. I'll take you somewhere safe, somewhere proper. This is no place for children. They're not going anywhere with you, Nora said firmly. They're staying here with me. With Jed. Don't be ridiculous. You have no legal standing. No means to care for them. I'm acting in their best interests. Like hell you are, Jed said, and now the rifle came up slightly. She told me about your visits, about the way you looked at those girls. You're not taking them. Not now, not ever. Reeves's 2 men shifted, hands moving toward their guns. Jed's finger found the trigger. I wouldn't, a voice called from the road. Sheriff Tucker rode into the yard, deputy beside him, both armed. Evening, gentlemen. Having a problem here? Reeves turned, recalculated. Sheriff, this man is harboring my wards. I have legal papers. Not in Wyoming, you don't. And these folks have rights too. Miss Brennan has been caring for those children for months. Mr. Cole here is providing them shelter. Far as I can see, everything's proper and legal. This is outrageous. I'll file a complaint. You do that. But if you try to take those children by force, you'll be arrested for attempted kidnapping. Am I clear? Reeves's jaw clenched. This isn't over. Maybe not. But it's over for tonight. Time for you and your boys to head back to town. I'll see you in court, Reeves said, looking at Jed. And I'll win. You're just a poor rancher. I have resources, connections. You can't fight me. Watch me, Jed said quietly. Reeves remounted, his men following. They rode off, but the threat hung in the air like smoke. Thank you, Sheriff, Nora said, her voice shaking. No thanks needed. Now I believe I'm here for a wedding. Jed looked at Nora, saw her fear and her courage in equal measure. Tomorrow morning. Judge Morrison will be here at dawn. I'll stay the night, if you don't mind. Camp in your barn, just in case our friend decides to come back. Appreciate it. That night, Jed sat with Nora by the fire while the girls slept, and Tucker kept watch outside. He meant what he said, Nora whispered. He'll fight this, so will we, together. Jed took her hand. Tomorrow you'll be my wife. The girls will be my daughters. Whatever comes after, we face it as a family. I'm scared. Me too. But I'm more scared of losing you, of letting fear stop me from living again. He kissed her hand. We're going to win, Nora. We have to. She leaned against him. And they sat in silence, drawing strength from each other, preparing for whatever came next. Dawn came soft and golden, painting the mountains in shades of rose and amber. Jed stood on his porch, watching the sunrise, thinking about Sarah. He'd visited her grave last night after everyone had gone to sleep, stood there in the darkness and talked to her for a long while. Told her about Nora, about Emma and Lily. Asked if she'd mind, if she'd forgive him for loving again. The wind had moved through the pine branches above her marker, gentle and steady, and he'd chosen to take that as blessing. Inside, Nora was getting ready with the girls' help. He could hear their excited whispers, their laughter. The sound filled something in him that had been empty too long. Judge Morrison arrived as the sun cleared the mountains, riding in with his wife Martha, a plump woman with kind eyes who carried a basket of fresh biscuits. Sheriff Tucker came from the barn where he'd spent the night, brushing hay from his clothes. Beautiful morning for a wedding, the judge said, dismounting. Everyone ready? Almost, Jed said. His hands were shaking slightly. He was 57 years old, about to get married for the 2nd time, and he was nervous as a boy. The cabin door opened, and Nora stepped out. She wore her sister's blue dress, her dark hair pinned up with the ivory comb Jed had bought her. She'd picked wildflowers that morning, made a small bouquet. She was beautiful in a quiet, real way that made his chest ache, Behind her, Emma and Lily wore their best dresses, ribbons in their hair, faces scrubbed clean and glowing with excitement. "Ready?" Nora asked, and her voice trembled just slightly. "More than ready," Jed said. They gathered in front of the cabin, the mountains rising behind them, the creek singing nearby. Judge Morrison opened his worn Bible, and Martha Tucker stood next to Nora, while the sheriff stood by Jed. "Dearly beloved," the judge began, his voice carrying clear and strong in the morning air. "We are gathered here in the sight of God and these witnesses to join Jedediah William Cole and Nora Catherine Brennan in holy matrimony." Jed barely heard the traditional words. He was looking at Nora, seeing the tears on her cheeks, the hope in her eyes, seeing the life they were about to build together. "Do you, Jedediah, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death parts you?" "I do," Jed said, and meant it with everything he had. "And do you, Nora, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death parts you?" "I do," Nora whispered. Jed pulled out the simple gold bands he'd had made in town. Nothing fancy, just honest gold, solid and lasting. He slipped one onto Nora's finger, and she placed the other on his. "Before God and these witnesses," Judge Morrison said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." He smiled. "You may kiss your bride, Jed." Jed cupped Nora's face in his weathered hands, kissed her gently, feeling like he was making a promise he'd keep to his last breath. She kissed him back, and when they parted, both were crying. Emma and Lily cheered, running forward to hug them both. Jed scooped them up, one in each arm, and held his family close. "There's one more thing," Judge Morrison said. "Jedediah has petitioned to adopt Emma and Lily as his legal daughters. While the formal process will take some weeks, I'm prepared to make a preliminary declaration right now." He looked at the girls seriously. "Emma and Lily, do you understand what adoption means? It means Mr. Jed would become your papa, legally and forever. You'd take his name. He'd be responsible for you, and you'd be his daughters in every way. Is that what you want?" They nodded solemnly. Then Emma spoke up, her small voice clear. "Yes, Your Honor. We want to be Coles. We want Mr. Jed to be our papa. Then by the power vested in me, I declare the intention to adopt, filed and noted. Emma Margaret Cole and Lily Rose Cole, welcome to your new family." Jed's vision blurred with tears. His daughters. They were his daughters now. Martha Tucker wiped her eyes. "Well, that's the finest wedding I've seen in years. Now let's have some breakfast before I cry myself sick." They ate Martha's biscuits with jam and fresh eggs, drank coffee, and talked about simple things. Sheriff Tucker promised to file all the paperwork in town that afternoon. Judge Morrison gave Jed copies of everything, officially stamped and signed. "Keep these safe," he said. "If Reeves comes back, you have legal standing now. You're their father. Nora's their stepmother. It's not perfect protection, but it's substantial." "Thank you," Jed said, "for everything." After the Tuckers and the judge left, Jed stood with his new wife and daughters, watching them ride away. His family, legal and real, and his. "Mrs. Cole," he said, trying out the name. Nora smiled. "Mr. Cole." "Papa!" Lily shouted, testing it. "Papa, can we go see Buck?" And just like that, it was real. He was Papa now. He was a husband again. He was part of something bigger than his grief, bigger than his fear. He was home. They had 3 hours of peace, 3 hours of being a family, of laughing and celebrating, of Emma and Lily calling him Papa with joy in their voices. 3 hours of Nora moving through the cabin as his wife, her ring catching the light. 3 hours of perfect happiness before reality came crashing back. The sound of hoofbeats brought Jed to the window, rifle in hand. 6 riders this time, Reeves and 5 hired men. They came fast and angry, and Jed knew immediately this wasn't going to end with talk. "Nora, take the girls into the back room," he said quietly. "Bar the door. Don't come out no matter what you hear. Jed, do it now." She gathered the girls, their faces suddenly frightened, and disappeared into the bedroom. He heard the bar slide into place. Jed stepped onto the porch, rifle ready. The riders pulled up in his yard, horses stamping and blowing. Reeves dismounted, his face twisted with rage. "You think you're clever," he spat. "Getting married, filing papers. But it doesn't matter. Those girls belong to me. They belong to themselves," Jed said evenly, "and to their mother. And now to me as their legal father. You have no claim here, Reeves. Go home. I'm not leaving without them. Men, search the cabin." Two of the hired guns moved forward. Jed levered a round into the rifle's chamber. The sound was loud and final. "First man who touches that door gets shot." "That's a promise." The men hesitated. They were being paid, but probably not enough to die. "I'll double your wages," Reeves snapped at them. "Just get those children." "You're making a mistake," Jed said. "I'm within my rights to defend my property and family. You try to break into my home, I'll put you down legal and justified." "You can't kill all of us," Reeves said. "Maybe not. But I'll sure as hell kill you first." The standoff held, tension thick as smoke. Then one of the hired men spoke up. "Mister, I ain't dying for some strangers' kids. This ain't what I signed on for." "You're fired," Reeves snarled. The man shrugged, turned his horse and rode off. A second man followed. That left three, and they looked uncertain. "Those girls are mine by right," Reeves said, his voice rising. "Thomas promised me." "Before he died, he promised. The mine, the girls, everything. He owed me. I invested everything in that mine, and he owed me." "What mine?" Jed asked. "You said it was worthless." I lied. The words burst out of Reeves like poison. He struck gold, rich vein, worth a fortune. But he wouldn't work it proper, wouldn't let me bring in real miners. Said it was too dangerous, said he wanted to take it slow. Wool didn't understand what we had. "So you killed him," Jed said flatly. "I didn't." Reeves stopped, realizing what he'd revealed. "It was an accident. The rock fall was an accident that you arranged," Jed said. "You killed your partner for gold, and now you want his children out of the way so you can claim it all. They're not his children," Reeves shouted. "They're his dead wife's brats. I have more right to Thomas's claim than some aunt and her orphans. With them in an institution, I'd have full control. I'd finally get what I'm owed." The sound of more horses came from the road. Sheriff Tucker rode in fast, deputy beside him, and behind them two more men Jed recognized as ranchers from up the valley. "Heard there might be trouble," Tucker said, hand on his pistol. "Glad we got here in time." "You heard that?" Jed asked. "Every word." "Reeves just confessed to murdering his partner." Tucker looked at Reeves. "Carlton Reeves, you're under arrest for the murder of Thomas Brennan and attempted kidnapping." "You can't prove anything," Reeves said. But his voice had lost its certainty. "I can prove you just confessed in front of 6 witnesses. And I suspect when we look into that mining accident, we'll find proof of tampering." "You're done, Reeves." Reeves lunged for his horse, trying to flee. His remaining hired men scattered, wanting no part of a murder charge. Tucker's deputy tackled Reeves before he made it to his saddle, wrestled him to the ground, and slapped irons on his wrists. "The gold claim," Jed said to Tucker. "It belongs to the girls, doesn't it? As Thomas's heirs?" "Reckon it does. Be managed by their legal guardian until they're of age." "That'd be you and your wife now." Reeves struggled against the restraints. "You don't understand. That gold is mine. I earned it. Years I spent on that mine, years of my life, and a man's life too, apparently," Tucker said grimly. "Take him to town, deputy. Lock him up good. I'll send word to the territorial marshal." They hauled Reeves onto a horse, his hands bound, his face purple with rage. "This isn't over," he screamed at Jed. "I'll get lawyers. I'll fight this. You're nobody, just a broken-down cowboy. You can't beat me." "Already did," Jed said quietly. They rode off, Reeves still shouting threats that faded into the distance. The ranchers stayed behind, helped Jed secure the property, made sure no one else was coming. When they finally left and silence returned, Jed went to the bedroom door. "It's safe now." "He's gone." The bar lifted. Nora opened the door. The girls pressed against her sides. "Is it really over?" "It's really over." He confessed. Tucker arrested him. "He's going to prison for what he did to Thomas." "The gold," Nora whispered. "He said there was gold. Belongs to the girls. Their inheritance. We'll manage it for them, make sure they're provided for." He knelt down, pulled Emma and Lily into his arms. "You're safe now. Nobody's ever taking you away. You're mine, and I protect what's mine." They clung to him, and he held them while they cried out all their fear and relief. Nora joined them, and they stood there together, a family finally and truly safe, with nothing and no one left to threaten them. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in colors of fire and gold. A new day was ending, and tomorrow would bring new beginnings. 3 months had passed since that day, and the world had transformed itself into something Jed barely recognized. Spring had given way to summer, and with it came changes both large and small that filled his life with a richness he'd forgotten was possible. The homestead looked different now. A garden flourished where Nora had planted vegetables and flowers, tended with Emma and Lily's enthusiastic if sometimes clumsy help. Fresh paint brightened the cabin's trim. New curtains hung in the windows, sewn from fabric Nora had chosen with care. The place looked lived in, loved, alive. The girls had grown taller, their faces fuller and healthier. They chattered constantly now, making up for lost time, their voices filling the cabin from dawn to dusk. They'd learned to ride, perched on Buck's broad back, while Jed led them around the property. They helped with chores, collected eggs, fed the chickens, learned to milk the cow. They were becoming ranch children, strong and capable. And there was news, good news that Nora had shared just last week, her face glowing with joy and nervousness. She was with child, due in late winter, the doctor said, a baby. Another child to love and raise and protect. Jed had wept when she told him, overwhelmed by the gift of it. A second chance at fatherhood, at watching a child grow from the very beginning. He'd placed his hand on her still flat belly and felt the future taking shape beneath his palm. The gold claim had been formally transferred to the girls, with Jed and Nora as legal guardians and managers. Samuel Wright, the lawyer, had helped them establish a trust. The mine was indeed rich, and careful working of it was bringing in steady income. More money than Jed had ever imagined having. He'd used some to expand the ranch, buy more cattle, hire a hand to help with the work. Some he'd put aside for the girls' futures, for education or dowries or whatever they might need. Some he'd spent on making the homestead more comfortable, adding a real bedroom, improving the barn, buying a wagon. But the money wasn't what mattered. What mattered was sitting around the dinner table each night, all of them together, sharing the day's events. What mattered was Emma's laughter when he tickled her, Lily's serious questions about everything, Nora's hand finding his in the darkness. What mattered was being needed, being loved, being home. Judge Morrison had finalized the adoption last month. Official papers, stamped and sealed, declaring Emma Margaret Cole and Lily Rose Cole his legal daughters. He'd framed them, hung them on the wall where he could see them every day. Reeves had been tried and convicted. Murder in the case of Thomas Brennan, attempted kidnapping, fraud. He'd go to prison for the rest of his life. The threat was gone, vanished like smoke, leaving only peace behind. On a bright July morning, a photographer came through town, traveling from homestead to homestead, offering portraits. Jed heard about it from a neighbor and immediately arranged for the man to come out to their place. A family photograph, he told Nora. Something to remember this time by. They prepared carefully. Nora wore her best dress. The girls wore matching ones she'd sewn from the fabric Jed had bought. Jed put on his good shirt, shaved carefully, combed his hair. Even Buck got groomed, his coat brushed until it gleamed. The photographer set up his equipment in the yard, the cabin and mountains visible behind them. He arranged them carefully. Jed seated, Nora standing beside him with her hand on his shoulder, Emma and Lily in front. Buck stood to the side, patient as always. Everyone hold very still, the photographer said. Don't breathe for just a moment. Jed sat there, surrounded by his family, and thought about all the twists and turns that had brought him to this moment. The losses he'd suffered, the years of loneliness, the storm that had changed everything. How close he'd come to missing all this, to staying locked in his grief forever. The camera clicked. The moment was captured, frozen in silver and light. This family, this life, this unexpected grace. After the photographer left, Jed saddled Buck, told Nora he needed to ride out for a bit. She understood without asking where he was going. He rode to the hill behind the cabin, to the graves under the big pine. He hadn't been up here in weeks, had been afraid somehow that his new happiness would feel like betrayal. But as he stood there looking at the wooden crosses, he felt only peace. "Sarah," he said aloud. "Mary, James, I want you to meet my family." He told them about Nora, about Emma and Lily, about the baby coming. Told them about the storm and the rescue, and how love had found him when he wasn't looking for it. Told them he'd never forget them, that they'd always be part of him, but that he was living again. Really living. The wind moved through the pine branches, warm and gentle. Somewhere a bird sang. The sun felt good on his face. "Thank you," he said to the graves, to the sky, to whatever force had brought him through darkness into light. "Thank you for this second chance." He rode back down the hill toward home. As he crested the rise, he saw the cabin below, smoke rising from the chimney. Saw Nora in the garden, saw the girls playing in the yard, saw everything that mattered spread out before him like a promise kept. He thought about that morning months ago, when he'd ridden out into the storm, alone and resigned to loneliness. Thought about finding 3 frozen souls in the snow and making the choice to save them. The choice that had saved him too. Sometimes the storms that nearly kill us are the ones that bring us home. Jed touched his heels to Buck's sides, and together they rode down the hill toward the sound of laughter, toward the smell of dinner cooking, toward the life he'd thought he'd lost forever and found again in the most unexpected way, toward home, toward family, toward all the bright tomorrows still waiting to be lived.